Good morning, everybody. Welcome to episode 10. Hard to believe we're double digits into this series already. Time is just flying by doing these episodes. It's crazy, the silly adage that once you have kids, time like loses all meaning. Um, yeah, and like adding all this work on top of my everyday life has been pretty crazy and overwhelming at times, and you know, too much at times, but yeah, just crazy to think we're 10 episodes in. Um, Number one, thank you all for being here, joining me this early. Means a lot. Um, I hope you appreciate all the work I put into all this. As I've stated before, I know this isn't the most convenient hour for everybody, and it's definitely not the best hour to get the best audience. But I hope you all understand. Having 3 kids and a million different schedules, I gotta wake up before the whole house is awake to get these episodes in, and, I'm very blessed to have the viewers I do, and the response and feedback is so wonderful, and it really keeps me motivated. Because there are days when I have no energy to put in the hours that it takes to put all this stuff together. This is about 5 years worth of archives that when I first started, I really didn't have the perspective I have now. So I didn't catalog everything. Nothing was organized, and it was at least, I would say it was at least 10,000 clippings, maybe more, that I've had to resort and reorganize and refilter. And for those of you that don't know, I create a thread on Twitter, and you don't need an account to view it. I put it in the description of every one of these videos, and it allows you to go back through and read every account at your leisure. It not only helps me organize things, but it's creating a really wonderful archive that, for anyone who's joining the series late, can go back and watch any of my previous episodes and have the material covered on hand. And if you don't have time to watch the video, you can just go back through the thread and look at what I talked about. And Texas is another prime example of a unbelievable amount of material that I have no way of covering in a short 2 hour time frame. I've really been enjoying kind of doing added bonus videos throughout the week of material that comes to me, or comments that bring up material I may have forgot about, or time material that I ran out of time to cover. Um, and as some of you may know, I break up some of my favorite articles from the show into short videos, and I post those throughout the week too. Um, that's been really great. Obviously, my bread and butter is the long episodes. I prefer doing that the most, but the clippings have been fantastic. It's attention spans aren't what they used to be, and I have to show love to everybody who's interested in old history and newspapers and stuff like that. So the short clippings have been great for getting eyes on the material that you know most people can't put in 2 hours to watch an episode, and I understand that. It's hard enough for me to even do the episode, let alone watch material. Since I've started my own channel, one of the downsides of doing something like this is you lose all time to watch other people's material. You know, every free second I have, I'm putting into this channel. So, and I got two boys with baseball going right now. We just had a two doubleheader tournament weekend, games Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, practices Monday, Thursday, and I work full time, so it's insane right now. I'm getting like 3-4 hours of sleep. So, um, yeah. Again, number one, I appreciate all you being here, and with all the material I have to cover, I'm going to quit jabbering And we're going to jump into this. I have some really special large articles, which, again, with the short amount of time I have, I try to avoid. I may do videos later on, but I think we're going to jump into the main thread here and go from there. Excuse me. So, yeah, again, welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. Let's share some screen here. We'll do a quick little run through, give you an idea of what we're dealing with for this episode. So, again, if you don't follow me, you should. And I know everyone, dislikes Twitter, but the thread abilities of Twitter are why I prefer it. Instagram is not nearly as um, properly designed for what I'm trying to do here. The thread abilities of Twitter that really help me very much. Not really. Okay. So yeah, this is what I post. I usually have this done on Mondays, but with a crazy busy weekend, this is where we're at. A little bit behind, but this thread will give you an idea of what I'm posting, what I'm talking about. Um, so you can follow along all the way up until the episode, so you kind of get an idea of what we're going to be talking about. Um, I had to really pick and choose, whittle the material down into, kind of some of my favorites, like I do with every episode. But Texas is kind of like a California, kind of like in Arizona, where I have probably 2 or 3 times the material that I've whittled down. Um, but yeah, I'm just trying to think if I should start with the PDFs. I have some really old ones that are wonderful. They're just long. Mhm. I think we'll just start with the Twitter threads. So yeah, um, again, you don't need a account, and the link is in the description. So you can just click on the thread, and you can go through and read all these. Um, and as I've said before, but for anyone who's new, I take a quote from the article and I run it through an AI, and it creates me, a set of images. It's not always the best, and that's okay. And depending on my time for the week, I may run 5 or 6 sentences till I get the appropriate clipping or the appropriate generation. And yeah, I think I love it. It's really added a new dimension to the clippings. You're gonna get some weird ones, it's AI, and that's okay. Um, but yeah, not everyone likes AI, and I understand that. But we're just dealing with pictures, so try not to take it too personal. But yeah, time is valuable, and so is yours, and I respect that. So we're going to jump right into this and get started. Um, and again, I appreciate every one of you for being here this early. And yeah, love you all very much. Let's jump right in. Actually, you know what? You know what I wanted to do real quick? We're going to go back here. And I often forget to display some of my favorite images. And one of my favorite threads was these. And I just don't do a good job of showing these. These are the bird's eye views for Texas from the 1870s through the early 1900s. 1910 was the latest on here. But these are just fantastic. They really give you a fantastic view. Let's keep going until it gets annoyingly pops out that. There we go. Here's Houston, 1891. Alpine Towing. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. um, these are incredible. Most of these are done with blimps, and like I've started with Alaska. I did quite a few in Portland. I did some for Washington, and I've forgotten in the last episodes. I get distracted and I forget to show some of these. I just love these because the architecture. Most of these buildings are burned down or don't exist anymore. So these buildings down here, again, this is in my thread, so you'll be able to go back and look at these if you like. And they're pretty high res images, so you can zoom in on this pretty easily. But just to give you an idea, in 1890, here's what Houston looked like. Houston, I've been there many times. I had an aunt that lived there. The city is absolutely ginormous. It's pretty crazy. And you can see just how large it was even in 1891. Here's Waco. Waco was quite an industrious city. After going back through my articles, I was quite impressed at what was going on in Waco. The geological richness of Texas really applies here. Um, we'll get into some articles, and if you follow my work, I'm a lover of radium. I talk about radium all the time. And a new correlation that I've been working on is connecting oil and natural gas to radium. Radium produces oil and natural gas. And this is kind of the secret of radium and why it's been buried. Radium is important for many, many things, but it's also probably one of the most important um, minerals in the development of this world we live in. It creates all earthquakes, all volcanic activity is driven by radium. Um, yeah, on and on and on. And Texas is incredibly minerally rich. It's oil rich and it's all radium driven. Waco was a huge city of industry. Just this entire area of Waco is, industry driven. This is Dallas, Texas. I can't remember the date on this one. It's pretty old. I believe it's 1871, maybe 1880. Amazing thing about Dallas is it's got railroads coming from like everywhere. And all the bridges are really large because the floodplain here was quite large back in the day before they developed some of their flood protection. But a very large city. Again, the buildings here are quite amazing. And again, I would say 95% of them don't exist anymore. This is a bird's eye view. I've shown these before. These are incredible. How exactly they got these pictures in the late 1800s at this elevation is beyond me, but it's pretty amazing. In some of the more eastern states, they show clearly defined star forts. And even in this picture, which again, you'll have to click on it through Twitter so you can open it out larger res for yourself. But you can see some very star like formations on these older cities. Pretty crazy. Alvaro, 1890, small little town. Ladonia, 1891. Childress, 1890. Just that random giant mud flutter sitting there. Wolf City, 1891. Sunset, 1890. Clarendon. There's always that one massive building that's buried. It's funny. Denison. Huge. Huge city. 1891. Paris. I believe this one's in the 1870s. Texarkana. Huge city of industry. Fort Worth. 1886. Greenville. 1886. Amarillo. I believe this one's 1890. Pretty interesting little different style of map than what you're used to seeing. And then lastly, San Antonio. San Antonio is an amazing place. I've had the pleasure of being there a few times. It's probably one of my favorite cities in Texas, to be honest. I just thought it was incredible. It had kind of like a Venice vibe to it. I remember going there as a kid and riding a boat down the river and thinking like, "Oh, where am I?" I love Texas. Anyone from Texas in chat, I appreciate you being here. It means a lot. My sister lived in Breckenridge for many years. Yeah, so one of my favorite places. So yeah, I wanted to cover those because you don't get a lot. Not every state has good aerial pictures from the 1800s, and I do a poor job of remembering to cover them sometimes. So back into the articles again. So here we go. Any Galveston? No, actually, I didn't find any Galveston, and I'm sure if I dug deeper and looked up every city and probably traced some more images, they're probably out there. Show me the edge. But I didn't. I can't get every city, so unfortunately, Galveston. Um, I have a great article since you mentioned Galveston. I'll pick Galveston. We'll go into that one next. An ancient Aztec city, Texas, 1891. Buried beneath the soil of El Paso, a treasure vault is found, which is supposed to contain vast stores of gold and manuscripts of the extinct race that once inhabited Mexico. Mundy's edition is the site of a castle built of white marble, which was the abode of priests. In El Paso, built above the ruins of a buried city. Now, if you've been following me along, we've covered many of the largest cities in every state, and we've shown this from Alaska, Seattle, Tacoma, Portland, Salem, my capital, many of the cities in California, all the way through Arizona, New Mexico, that all of the major cities are literally built on top of the ruins of a previous race. And we're not talking just little adobe mud brick buildings. We're talking some incredible, gigantic buildings. Again, the largest ancient buildings ever found were found in the American Southwest. 1,200 rooms, some of these buildings. Walls that were 20 miles long. And we're going to get into Great Walls here as well. These giant walls covered every city all across the United States. And as I've hypothesized and stated many times, they may have been for warring tribes, but I believe they were for keeping out giant animals. If you remember back to my New Mexico episode, and for those who are new, you should go back and watch the clip. Emperor Tigrinus, the king of the Aztecs, the Atlantean, living in a time frame where there were no war with other men. They were warring with giant animals. Emperor Tigrinus was what they called the first Tesian race in the world. The oldest redheaded mummies ever found. The turkey was mummified with him. It was their sacred bird. It was the phoenix rising from the ashes. He was buried with 2 stone battle axes. And in his tomb, there were paintings of him fighting giant saber-toothed tigers, giant mammoths. And what's really important about this is that this settlement destroys the narrative that people get hooked on. And it shows that Emperor Tigrinus was living with 2, if not 3 other phenotypes or races or whatever you want to describe them as. And that they had 2 or 3 different types of burial, meaning you had 2 or 3 different types of religious type ceremony existing together. Some buried their dead in jars and burned them into ashes. Others were mummified. So I believe this was kind of after some kind of cataclysm, the remnants came together, and he was treated like a king. He was over 1.5 feet taller than the other people of his tribe. He was tall, redheaded, and the other people in his tribe some had woolly hair, some had long, straight hair, some had high cheekbones, but they were anywhere from 4.5 to 5.5 feet tall. And remember, he was approaching 7 feet. So quite important to remember. And yes, so back to the article. All cities lie on buried cities. So this is important. They're like, is El Paso built above the ruins of a buried city? Of course it is. San Antonio, Dallas, Houston are built on top of ancient cities. That eminent scientist asserts with positive assurance that where the present flourishing and modern metropolis of the Southwest, El Paso, now stands, was centuries ago the site of a magnificent city of castles and palaces whose walls were of solid masonry and polished marble. Before Cortez set foot on the soil of Mexico, before the Emperor Montezuma was tortured by the cruel Spaniards into disclosing the hiding place of his gold, and before the unhappy Aztec was driven to the mountains by his merciless conquerors, and his beautiful palaces and mines of fabulous richness confiscated, Dr. Burson claims that a beautiful Aztec castle stood at this point on the banks of the Rio Grande. and that it was buried beneath the present surface of the earth by a volcanic eruption of old Mount Franklin. Longo, good to see you. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you. Love you, man. So, yeah, like we've stated now, we've covered Greek cities found buried in mountains in Alaska. We found beaches 1,000 feet below surface level in Tacoma, Washington. If you remember my Washington video, they excavated 50 million cubic yards of earth to build Seattle. Seattle was completely buried in up to 100 feet of mud. The most obvious examples of some kind of event being erased, they couldn't even find bedrock to build buildings on. They had to excavate 50 million cubic yards of earth. And I have pictures all over from that episode, and I cover it pretty in depth. This is what was happening. Oregon, Salem, Southern Oregon, they find remnants of Chinese cities, Phoenician boats, Phoenician inscriptions. And it's the same all the way through Colorado, where they find a Phoenician boat buried 60 feet below ground, petrified. So, great way to start the episode. Kind of reinforcing again what we've been saying all along, that we're living on top. We're standing on the shoulders of giants, 100%. And since someone mentioned Galveston, it was one of the first comments I read, I'm going to read this one next. Lost Race of Texas, 1891. Prehistoric city near Galveston engulfed by a tidal wave. Relics of a prehistoric race were discovered in Galveston, Texas, just previous to the storm that flooded the city. I apologize for the cutoff here. You know, sometimes these scans, when they get to the edge of a page, they can get a little shitty. Nearly 2,000 human skeletons were found. This is insane, you guys. And scientists who examined the excavations had just given the opinion that an ancient city had been submerged by a tidal wave that drove all the inhabitants when the calamity of centuries ago was repeated. The bones were discovered in search for relics for the archaeological exhibit of the Pan American exhibition. You'll find this again over and over and over. These exhibitions are just collecting relics from all over the world, predominantly the American Southwest, but all over the United States, and putting them on show. And this is no different, because once these things are over, they just get buried and taken underground, which is to be held in Buffalo next summer. The skeletons, beyond a doubt, several thousand years old, and the character of the people who occupied the coast of the Gulf in this period is an interesting subject of speculation. However, they may have been, and whenever they may have lived, the remains found show beyond question that some terrible outbreak of nature caused the sudden death of thousands of these ancient people, and their burial in the strata were chance that they were exhumed by the people of a far distant age. It was but a short time ago that the excavations were begun, which rested in these singular and extraordinary discoveries. The finding of the remains in the first place was quite accidental. H.G. Simmons, superintendent of the Arizona New Mexico Railway, was making excavations along the lines of the railroad. Now, what's amazing about this too is you find so often when they're building railroads that they keep uncovering stuff. You know, when you're driving pylons, you know, if you're building over any kind of a depression, you know, and you have to create a small little bridge or raise an elevation or whatever it is, they find stuff like this. And we're going to explore another one later on in this episode. When they are building a bridge across the river and driving pylons, they uncover some more ancient burial history. When bones were found in the earth removed, examination of the contents of the steam shovel, skulls, and human teeth were noticed. Now, just imagine, you know, you're building a railroad and you start digging into the earth, and you're just literally hundreds and hundreds of bones and skulls. You're just digging through bodies. Further search led to the discovery of skeletons of whole families, together with ivory beads and other objects of human handiwork. Now, the ivory thing is really incredible. We found ivory from Alaska all the way here to Texas. This whole series, ivory's everywhere. And we keep talking about the mines. The ancient areas here were always related to Solomon, and I've been postulating the whole time that this whole area was Ophir, and the gold, the richest mines in the world were here. All down the Mississippi Valley into the American Southwest, even up into Alaska. I mean, obviously, Alaska is one of the richest gold mining places in the world. And, I showed an article talking about, was Noah's Ark discovered in Alaska? Well, I don't necessarily think it was Noah's Ark. I think it was one of these giant Atlantean ships that, long ago I've talked about several times. The ship was 1,200 feet long. And absolutely, you can imagine, it was petrified. This is a ship from a previous age, and I've hypothesized that the Atlantean ships were probably around 1,000 feet or maybe a little more. And, Dr. Longo has, with his giant stone anchors, I think that's pretty close. It might even be a little bit larger. And the size of a human required to move these stone anchors makes a 1,200-foot ship, make a lot more sense. And that these people were mining from Alaska. Again, they find ancient mines, Roman cities, mosques, ancient cities with mosques buried in ice in Alaska. So yeah, not a stretch now. That's kind of been the bonus of being 10 episodes in. We have a ton of material to go back and look through, and we keep finding the same exact story. Ivory beads and other objects of human handiwork. Realizing the valuable and scientific character of the discovery, a systematic search of the strata in the vicinity was made. Geologists say the whole section of the state was once covered by the Gulf of Mexico. The idea once came to Mr. Simmons that in the distant ages a tidal wave had occurred at the time the Gulf covered more than that part of the country, that at present, and that the bones were the remains of thousands of human beings who had been drowned in the overflow of the waters of the Gulf. The theory was later upheld by leading scientists. Now, this is great too because, again, not to keep talking about Dr. Longo, but we've talked endlessly about the obvious examples of a tidal event in the Gulf, and not just one. And as we get farther along here in this episode, we're going to show that the Gulf of Mexico either extended all the way into middle Florida or middle Texas, sorry, or there was an absolutely cataclysmic tidal wave. Now, we've talked about Chicxulub Crater and, what kind of event would be caused by, a meteor hitting the Earth in that location. But yeah, many, many possibilities there, but really, really interesting. And I wanted that to be the next one since someone had already mentioned Galveston. Again, also one of my favorite cities on the Gulf. I seriously debated moving there in college. Love Galveston, Corpus Christi. I just love the Gulf. This is not a city on the Gulf I probably won't enjoy living. And since we keep talking about Emperor Tigrinus, we keep relating Atlantean concepts. By coincidence, this is just lined up perfectly. This is the next one I would like to read. And it's going to kind of reinstate what we've been saying all along, that the deeper we go down, the more advanced things become. And this article reinforces that for me. And, they keep wanting to talk about, Stone Age weaponry. But this article is going to show you that we're dealing with the Atlantean overlays are very, very obvious to me. Discovery in Texas. Again, I want to try to take time and be a little more present with live chat. 130 people in chat. Thank you, everyone, for joining me this early hour, 5:46 Pacific time, 8:46 Eastern time. Your time is very precious to me, as mine is to yours, I hope. And this series has become quite a little child of mine in a sense. And each and every one of you here, I really appreciate. So yeah, the owl symbolism. I see some of you talking about it already. We're going to get into that. This is found on many of the temples here. So I'm going to try and make a mental note to read my owl article next. Discovery in Texas, Washington, 1889. So for people that may be new, I want to reinforce this. This is the title of the article. This is the newspaper it was printed in, a Washington publication, 1889. Immense archaeological interest has been made. A tree was blown down, below it a skull. Now, why is this important? Um, through my work and some of the things I've said on Doctor's Longo shows for people that have seen all those episodes, I've covered quite immensely the idea that they were planting trees on top of mounds. This was kind of a sacred rite. This existed in China. This existed in Japan. Pagodas were built over kings. Flower Jones, thank you so much. Flower is just such a sweetie. Always here, always donating. It really means a lot. In the next, little while, I'll be announcing some things I plan on doing to create, more exciting things for the show. And your donations are all going to go towards, making some new concepts I have for this channel and bringing them into fruition. So I really appreciate that. I've just been pulling everything from YouTube and kind of postulating what it is that my next step is going to be. So thank you so much, Flower. It means a lot. So yeah, they're planting trees on top of burials, on top of mounds. And this is some kind of think of like Avatar, the mother tree. This is like kind of a sacred um, funeral rite. And I find a lot of these oak trees, cypress trees. One of the largest burial mounds in Florida was covered by the largest cypress tree that was living in Florida at the time in the 1800s, 1900s. And beneath it, they found a giant. So similar thing here. Tree blown down, below it a skull. Discovery in Texas. Unearthing an old burial ground of Indians and Aztecs. A correspondent writing from El Dorado, Texas says, a discovery of immense archaeological interest has recently been made near Painted Cave on the Southern Pacific Railroad at the junction of the Pecos and Rio Grande. Mr. Vandervoort, who owns a farm near the town, mentioned he found on his place after a recent windstorm a large cottonwood tree blown down and leaving the roots exposed. In the earth, loosened by its fall and upheaved by its spreading roots, he noticed a round object, which upon inspection proved to be a human skull. The skull was that of an Aztec. After 2 or 3 feet had been removed, almost every upheaval of the spade brought to light a bone or a weapon or other object. There was a great number of arrowheads, both of stone and of glass, in the manufacture of which the Aztecs excelled. But to set at rest all doubts as to what people the bones had belonged, the peculiar weapon of the Azatian race, we'll say Atlan, Atlantean, was found. This weapon is a short metal axe. Okay, metallurgy again. We've talked about this. We've been showing metal weapons and all kinds of metal stuff all across the American Southwest. We're not dealing with Stone Age. We're dealing with metallurgy with blades of glass. Again, metal axe with blades of glass. The metal is supposed to be copper, but the specimens are tarnished, encrusted by age and burial. Again, hardening of copper. The technology that they found in some of these hardened copper was stuff that we didn't even have, and we barely have any understanding of today. Hardening of copper is incredibly complex and difficult. And I would stretch to say that this copper is probably from the Lake Michigan, the Great Lakes region, which again, they're finding Great Lakes copper in Europe, in Peru. And the trade that was going on here in America was unbelievable. We've talked about the immensity of the cities, the ancient mining. This is the land of Ophir. This is Solomon's gold mines, essentially. Several shields are among the relics, and on being cleaned were found to be brass, each skillfully engraved with an owl. Copper knives and stone tomahawks are abundant, and there are 20 or 30 headbands of silver and copper. Now, remember, Emperor Tigrinus, he was carrying a crystal dagger. Okay, remember, he had the stone battle axes and the crystal dagger, and he had a shield that was made of mica and reflected sunlight like a mirror. Okay, he was blinding these creatures with his shield and with his crystal dagger. You know, that again, the tech was far more advanced than we think. Copper knives, stone tomahawks are abundant, and there are 20 or 30 headbands. I covered that, sorry. There is also a helmet or cacique of thin silver with a small hole in the top. The headdress of a Mexican officer was a helmet with a top knot of feathers. Now, Eber, the feather. I meant this Eber in the Hebrew roots of the feather and the feathered helmet. It reminds me of the Trojans. There's so many overlays with the Romans in America and the Hebraic races and the Phoenicians. It's pretty crazy, and you keep finding them here. And as we get to the Gulf, we're going to find more of it. Silver armor, leg, sorry, it's a little rough here. Leg from knees to ankle. Silver armor from legs to knees to ankle was found near the helmeted skull. One bony hand still clenched a dart with 3 copper points and held it so firmly that it was necessary to keep hand and all. Another ghastly object was a pair of clenched jaws, holding beneath their discolored teeth a small image engraved on agate. This must have been the likeness of a god thrust into the mouth, and a number of gold and silver pendants and a quantity of Aztec currency were picked up. The later consists of bits of tin in the shape like the letter T. The letter T, in the Tau, it's pretty amazing. There's so many overlays with the Japanese and the Chinese all along the American Southwest here. And remember, before the Chinese language was completely rewritten by the British, well, quote British, a conglomerate of people, they had what was called hieroglyphic Chinese, and it very much resembled Phoenician and Block Hebrew. And the T is an important symbol that kind of crosses the bridge of all of these, It's like the A and the Aleph and all of these common symbols that exist all along the American Southwest. It's like the swastika. We've talked about this endlessly. Arizona was the land of the Tejan race, New Mexico as well. The Irie. And you find the swastika, it's obviously a sacred symbol to the Buddhists. You find Buddha statues and images engraved in Arizona, New Mexico. You're going to find them here in Texas, all throughout Mexico, all along the Mississippi Valley. Among the human bones were mingled those of several animals, too small to have been cattle. Horses were, of course, unknown. They definitely weren't unknown. They had these incredibly odd horses back then. Remember, they had giant horses that were 50 feet tall in California. And then they found horses that were 3 feet tall. So we're dealing with giants and we're dealing with pygmies and dwarfs. It's, America is the land of Tolkien, and they had all of these incredible different types of people living here and different types of animals. Too large to have been dogs. I doubt that. Now, if you remember in my Nevada episode, we talked about the giant man hunting the elephants by the lakeside, and his stride, they guess his height to be 10 feet, and he had a dog running with him. Canine footprints, huge canine. This 10-foot giant was hunting elephants by the lakeside in Nevada, prehistoric Nevada. There were those of ocelots trained by the Aztecs for the hunt and for battle. You guys, you hear that? Buried with this man was an ocelot. Now, I've heard these stories before, but to find actual bones, incredible. Okay, this guy must have been someone very special, you know, for when he passed. His ocelot was buried with him. Think about that. How crazy that would be to see in battle. This man with this in armor beyond anything found in America, or at least anything described to us today. Running with this shield with an owl and a tomahawk made of metal with blades of glass, with his ocelot running by his side. That the ocelots took an active part is shown by the fact that the jaws of one held the severed skull of an Indian, while the teeth of a second were fastened on a thigh bone. So this guy had multiple ocelots with him, and it was buried with a skull and a thigh bone of its enemy. In turn, a tomahawk was still sticking his partially cloven skull. You know, maybe this wasn't a tomb, and this was a grave of a battle scene. You know, who knows? But incredible. I just love the imagery. Just picture this Aztec warrior covered in incredibly beautiful and advanced silver armor, carrying these glass metal weapons with two ocelots running at his side, fighting his enemies. I mean, it's just insane. You know, I've been saying this over and over that Tolkien's written conception of America, Middle Earth, as he called it, seems to be far more accurate than we ever guessed, and that truth is stranger than fiction. Next, we're going to hop into this one right here. This is a good one. Yeah. And again, I'm horrible at reading chat. I'm trying to be better. So be patient with me. I know you guys have all seen that no matter what, I go over 2 hours. You know, my goal was originally 90 minutes, but that's just way too short. You know, even in we're approaching 45 minutes in, and I have an unbelievable amount still to talk about. And so, yeah, I appreciate you guys' patience, and I appreciate you all being here. 150 people strong means a lot. And yeah, so I hope you're enjoying the articles so far. And yeah, here's the next one. A Texas Wonder, Connecticut, 1893. Prehistoric pavement. The mound is square shaped with sloping sides. Pyramid for sure. Petrified wood covering the summit. An acre and a half. The summit of this pyramid. Okay, the capstone's cut off of this pyramid, right? There's petrified wood. So they had like a wood floor on the top of this pyramid that the capstone's been removed. And the top, just the top, is an acre and a half. Now, that's a big ass pyramid, you guys. The top of the Giza pyramid isn't an acre and a half, not even close. Now, granted, the top could be far lower down the pyramid, creating more surface area, but either way, this is a large structure. An acre and a half, mathematical precision, blocks of stone split and sawed at the upper surface. Sawed stone? We've been seeing that a lot, haven't we? An important discovery recently made in Wise County. A prehistoric pavement of petrified wood supposed to have been constructed by mound builders of an extinct race. A discovery of probably great archaeological value as regards to the prehistoric people of the United States was recently made on the farm of H. Richwall's 25 miles southwest of Decatur in Wise County, Texas. It consists of a pavement of petrified wood covering the summit of a mound 1.5 acres in area. Samples of the pavement were brought to the Dallas News by D.M. Garvin of Cleveland, Ohio, who made the following statement regarding the discovery. The mound is 60 feet high, square-shaped, with sloping sides. Again, a pyramid. It was looked upon as an ordinary clay structure until a short time ago when in digging the soil on the summit, which is level and measures an acre and a half, a petrified pavement was struck under what appeared to be a shallow deposit of drift. Again, Shallow deposit of drift. Why people are so often thinking these are just natural formations is because they're covered in earth by some event, right? Covered by drift. Not always are they covered by, mud, as we've exposed through Arizona and New Mexico and Nevada. Some of these hills, remember they called them hills, and they were quite large, were buried in up to 15, 20 feet of sand. And they found buildings that housed thousands of people, giant stone buildings covered by sand drifts. Now, you've heard me talk about one of the ways to make large quantities of sand is through the petrifaction of organic materials. Um, trees, when they petrify, they can often become quartz and all these different materials, as I've stated throughout this series. They can become silver, they can become copper, they can also become like sandstone, and they make us fine silica like sand. Sand in deserts, the deserts of the world, are proving to be likely the petrifaction of organic material. And I'd go as far as to say giant trees. It was looked upon as an ordinary, I covered that, I apologize. A petrified pavement was struck under what appeared to be a shallow deposit of drift. Further, excuse me, I need some water. Further exploration showed that the entire summit of the mound was paved. The petrified blocks were laid on ends as compactly as Nicholson pavement. In places, the pavement is perfectly smooth, while in other places, owing to the depression of the soil has undergone during the ages, it is irregular. It is the mound, which was constructed with mathematical precision, also contains some blocks of stone that seem to have been used in a building. The samples of the pavement are 4 inches long and undoubtedly are petrified wood. 3 inches of their length is silica, and the remaining inch measuring to the wearing surface is carbonate of lime. Again, when this was built, it was natural wood, and this pyramid was struck by some incredible electrical force that turned this upper wood platform into silica and carbonate of lime. This combination, which is not uncommon in petrifactions, exactly, as we've said with mining of lime and silica, when you find mining carbonate of lime, lime is obviously really important. It's used in incredible agriculture. It's a worldwide, the worldwide demand is very high. Silica is the same thing. Silica and sand are, brothers, of course, and, large quantities of sand, as would cover a desert or several states like the American Southwest. What created that, like the Sahara Desert and the Gobi, shows that the pavement was probably set in siliceous sand and that the upper part was subjected to the action of water combining lime and solution. Now, I highly doubt this. I think this happened instantly. I don't think it was covered by some mineral rich water over thousands of years and slowly turned into this. I think it happened instantly. Many of these petrifactions, as we've covered with trees and living humans, reptiles, you name it. We find giant petrified fruit. We find trees where the fruit is still on the limb. Okay, this isn't thousands of years. These trees aren't buried by a flood with the fruit hanging perfectly. These petrifactions happen in an instant. While thousands of mounds have been discovered on this continent, this is the only one in which, through the agency of petrifaction, nature has embalmed an evidence of a place and civilization occupied by the mound builders far in advance of what has been accorded them by antiquarians. Now, this is incredibly important. Okay. As we get more into these eastern states and we start moving up the Mississippi Valley, we're going to find a lot of this. Okay. These pyramids are far more advanced than we're told. Again, some of these mounds that they leave covered, it's purposeful because these aren't all just tombs. Some of these are huge buildings that go deep underground and have tunnel systems that connect many of them together. Okay, again, these are entrances. We have the Ute Indians. We have The Muskogee Indians, we have the Cherokee, we have the Creek, who in their narrative say the mounds were entrances to the subterranean and they were used to survive floods. I've talked about in previous work, and perhaps I'll do a separate episode on this, that the Giza pyramid was built by Noah, and that's the true ark. Arks weren't boats, they were pyramids, and they were doorways into the subterranean worlds. And when you look at some of the articles I've written about the Giza Plateau, before it was flooded with sand and debris, it looked like giant tree stumps. And anyone else here from Rock Wall? I can't wait to get to my Rock Wall article. There's two towns that are really important. They found rock walls in Stonewall. Funny name, Stonewall, of course. And they found the rock wall in Rockwall, Texas, of course. And as we get farther east again in this series, we will cover the Great Wall of Mississippi, the largest stone wall found in America. I believe it's just a continuation of this same wall in Texas, and that these people were building incredibly advanced walls. So before I get off point, because we'll get there, this mysterious race practiced the arts of agriculture is proved by the fact that mounds are so close together in some districts as to have rendered it impossible for their occupants to have subsided by fishing and hunting, and that those inhabitants engaged in mining and commerce is proved by the discovery in Peruvian mounds of Lake Superior copper. Now, how is that for an overlay? I completely forgot about this in this article. We were just talking about the Lake Superior copper being found not only in Europe, Mediterranean, but also in Peru. So, yeah, we know that we're dealing with an incredibly advanced culture with millions and millions and millions, hundreds of millions of inhabitants all across America, all the way down to Peru, with a trade network beyond anything we could have imagined. But although copper chisels, rimmers, and indented knives might have been used as saws, have been found in mounds, there never was any proof that the mound builders were woodworkers until this discovery in Wise County. That's why petrifaction is so important, as we've said, because wood often disintegrates, in a flood action or, volcanic action, it's burned up, it's disintegrated. But when you have it petrified, it becomes a crystal that can endure the ages. Wood being an article that time destroys, and all its evidences of the home life of the mound builders must necessarily have long since obliterated. Now, we talked about incredible woodworking with the cedar, right? The cedars of Lebanon, as I've been stating, of Utah and Arizona. Incredible cedar work, huge, huge beams of cedar, serpents carved in cedar, all kinds of amazing wood carvings. So the woodworking was very advanced here. While this agency in the Wise County mound has only preserved a beautiful pavement, it may be inferred that a people sufficiently advanced to execute a work that in recent years has immortalized Nicholson in the annals of street engineering were capable of raising handsome wooden temples and other structures. Now remember, we're dealing with hewn wood, or cut wood, of course, hewn, but hewn stone, advanced hewn stone, mathematically precise pyramids. That they were not of the same race as the Indians appears from the fact that the latter have no tradition concerning the origin of the mounds exactly. We've been saying this all along, that the people were standing on shoulders of giants. Many of the quote Native Americans don't have any going back, even 10 10 generations don't have a narrative of this. Though their civilizations subsequently perished, they could not have lost track of such an important part of the history of their race. Of course not. Many of these people were migrating tribes. They were wandering in after a cataclysm had already wiped these people out. Certain it is now that the mound builders who once thickly inhabited this country were agriculturalists, mechanics, and traders. But to find whence they came and whither they went, one gropes in the darkness of the past. Did their occupation extend back to that period before the dawn of man's creation and the Noachian deluge? Remains of men have been found in this country that point to antediluvian antiquity. Yeah, of course. Absolutely, they do. A piece of basket matting was found in an island in Vermilion Bay, Louisiana. This is important because when we get to Louisiana, we're going to talk about this, and Mississippi. Below the remains of an elephant, the remains of a mastodon, partly wasted, were found in Missouri. And in excavating for gasworks in New Orleans, a human skeleton was found below the remains of four cypress forests. The accumulation, in the opinion of scientists, requiring 14,000 years to form. So that's 4 different ages, 4 different levels of forest buried, new level of forest grows, buried, new level of forest grows, buried. And they found a human skeleton at the 4th layer. The geological age in which the pavement of the mound in Wise County petrified is a live subject of inquiry, and doubtless will be disputed. Was it during the period in which a great chain of lakes extended from the Gulf of Mexico northward, or when was it? It was Horace Greeley who undertook to write up a mound for his paper, but after all he could tell about it was contained in the words, "It is here." I love it. That's fantastic. He has no answer for it. And again, if it's on surface level, which I would say this pyramid goes far below the surface, but if it's on surface level, it's not that old. I mean, it's old. Don't get me wrong. Of course, it's old. But again, when we're dealing with what he just stated here, in New Orleans, a human skeleton was found below the remains of 4 cypress forests. This takes me back to the Calaveras skull in California we've talked about, where they found 3 layers of civilization, buried cities, stone implements, and they found a skull of a giant where the skeleton was an inch thick. The thickness of the skull was an inch. And the Calaveras County had one of the most ancient forests still standing in America. So we're dealing with quite great antiquity here. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that one. I love that one. Lined up perfectly with what we were mentioning. This ties in with the Atlantean technology that we're dealing with. What's that? The newest Black Panther movie, I think, is probably the closest example to what kind of technology and the wars we were dealing with. Flying ships, radium. If you haven't seen my radium series, I got, 2 episodes up now, with the 3rd episode being my interview on the Higher Side Chats. I discuss in depth what I believe old technology was, and it was radium driven. They were using crystals as batteries because crystals absorb the light; they suck it in like a vacuum of radium, and they created lasers from these crystal devices, these crystal batteries, and the radium, a byproduct of of radium, is helium. So I believe these flying ships were using both. And mercury and radium have an incredible relationship together. So does bismuth. On and on. But yeah, so these two together, I think, are pointing to a very similar race. Atlantean. I'm going to skip that one. Human sacrifices. Petrified idols. Let's do this. Well, this one's pretty messed up. A mound of petrified skulls. Again, AI generated this one. I just loved it. Here's another image I found from a city in Mexico. Pretty messed up. The clipping, the book I got this from, shows towers, whole buildings comprised of skeletons, obelisks made of skeletons, as this image shows. And here's a mound they found in Texas, okay? 1861, this article. It is reported that near Carrizo Springs, Texas, an oval top mound covered with petrified human skulls has been discovered. The mound is circular in form and about 100 feet high, and on one side is joined to a short range of hills of about the same height. So, this mound they uncovered, going on as far as the eye can see, are other mounds that they haven't uncovered yet. On the summit, and for some distance down the sloping side, it is covered with what appeared to be smooth spherical bones, which upon close examination proved to be, it is said, petrified human skulls distorted into some grotesque shapes. It is further stated that by removing the loose dirt and sand from the orifices of the face, the unmistakable human countenance is revealed. Bones of other classes are also said to be found here, and from all appearances, the whole mound is formed of human skulls. Now, necromancy is found all over this area, so that doesn't surprise me. When you get into, some of the dark arts when it comes to, whatever the Aztec, or Mayan, the overlays are there. Again, we talk about um, this older culture being invaded. The Spaniards weren't the first ones to invade this area. And whether it was Scythian Tartar hordes or who knows what, um, the dark arts were certainly practiced here. There's no doubt about that. Should we do the rock wall now since someone mentioned it? We probably should do the rock wall. And of course, did I somehow not include it? How funny would that be? I don't think I did. So give me 1 second. Somehow I didn't put it in my thread. Apologies. Nope, we just did that one. So again, if you saw what I just did there, it shows you how easy it is to search my archive. You click on the magnifying glass, you type in my handle, and then you can put any word you want after that, and you can search my 8,000 posts. My apologies. There it is. That's frustrating that I somehow didn't include that. We're going to change that right now. Copy link. So I'm just adding this one to the thread here because somehow I didn't get it on there. Yep, I didn't. That's annoying. Well, that's good to find because this one's important. So yeah, we're going to do this one next. The Rock Wall of Texas. This is by far the best article I ever found on the Rock Wall of Texas. It's a long one. So let's just check chat here real quick. 175 people. Thank you everybody for being here. Again, I tend to just read and try to fit as much in here as I can. So I apologize for not looking at chat as often as I should. I appreciate you all very much for being here. What's everyone think so far? What do you guys think of these articles? Pretty crazy, huh? Looking at the land you stand on with new eyes is kind of the whole goal of this series. It doesn't matter where you're from. Just look down, and below your feet is a previous civilization. Obviously not always, but I'd say very likely, especially if you live in or around some of these major city centers. It's an ancient culture right below you. And some people have asked me to give my opinions on this whole thing, and I've kind of avoided that just because there's so much conjecture involved. Robbie, thank you so much, man. Means the world to me. You guys just being here means so much, and your donations, as I stated before, are all going into a pool. And I have some big things planned for the summer, and trying to take the channel to the next level. I have, for those who've been asking, I have a membership um, in the works with some kind of advanced content where I get more into my own personal opinions of things, and I go a little bit deeper since I'm stuck to just dealing with episodes about the states every week. It'll be kind of my outlet to cover some of my material from more of a broad range perspective. So a membership should be up within the next month. Yeah, and I'm working on a podcast where people will be able to listen to this material and not have to worry about looking at images I'm sharing. Skeptic, thank you. Holy smokes. Thanks, guys. Again, it means so much. Um, so yeah, I have some new stuff coming, but time is so limited for me. I appreciate your patience. Again, I'm only 3 months. It's not even 3 months yet. I'm only 3 months into this channel. Oh, and by the way, I hit 6K last night, 6K subs. So that's a big milestone for me. It means a lot to me, and I owe that all to you listeners out there and your continued interest. So yeah, look forward to a new membership thing. And if you don't want to do a membership, I don't blame you. Again, that's no problem. I just want to get to a point where people that come every week and watch my videos every week, they can watch it ad free, and the memberships provide a way to do that. Ozzy, thank you, appreciate it. Wow, man, you guys are amazing. So yeah, I'm just working on stuff to get to that point, and a podcast I thought would be great. One of my other passions is literature, obviously. I'm called the Archivist. And for those of you who are new to my story or haven't listened to my higher side chats, in 2007, I had a motorcycle accident where I was nearly killed, nearly paralyzed. And I had a out of body experience. And I spent the next year recovering from the accident. And all I did was read nonstop. And I haven't stopped since. I became obsessed with consciousness and out of body states, mostly just consciousness. What is this life? The questions we all ask ourselves. What is this life? Why am I here? Who am I? That was a big one. Who am I? And yeah, so where am I? That was 2007. What is that? 16? A long time ago. And I've had 3 beautiful boys since. And just the alchemical experience of having children and watching them grow and seeing yourself in them, the mirror that your children are, and all of these things, and how it's shaped my opinions of life. And ultimately I want to start to share more of a positive outlook on things. And I know that stuff like this can lead some people into a not a depression, but into, like, a dark understanding of the world. And I want to share what my views about what to do with this material and how to make your life better, and things that I've had to do through experience and growth that have helped me in my life. So some of my podcast stuff will be more of my literature stuff. Um, you know, Transmuting your life, creating the life you want. You are what you think. Um, Trying to keep as positive and of an aspect as you can, and that you're here to learn and grow and love, and that this a lot of these articles continue to reinforce that I think that this is a mechanistic system where it's kind of a reset, wipe, reset, wipe, reset, wipe, and new levels of existence come into play. And it's not necessarily like a game. I don't think it's necessarily like a game, but it is a bit of a construct. And we're here to grow and to meet people that we love and have things in common with, and to learn, obviously, is a big one. And I hope that I'm helping contribute and open new eyes. And yeah, and so I want to have an outlet to show some of my more positive um, material. So yeah, I just wanted to give everyone kind of a channel update there. 6K update. Vintage love. Thank you. Thanks for the awesome channel and all the time. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yes. People don't quite understand. It is a lot of time. It is a lot of time. So your great comments really keep me going, and it means so much. So before I waste any more time, let's get into this next one. This is the Rock Wall of Texas, the Great Wall of China. What? In Texas? Here we go. Interesting prehistoric ruins. BC 1893. The Great Wall of Texas? Prehistoric wall discovered on the frontier of the Lone Star State. Passes through Milano. 20 miles long. Built of solid masonry. 10 to 15 feet high. Many feet thick. And guess what? They never found the bottom. They dug down later after this article, 60 feet, didn't find the bottom. And the things that this wall is made of will blow your mind. Continuation of those 2 articles previous, the very advanced pyramid, the Petrified pyramid, and the advanced shield and weaponry of that Aztec soldier with the 2 ocelots as his pets, right? This wall is made up of metals, exotic metals that don't even exist in this region. This is a wall made by a very advanced race, and yeah, it's incredible. It's not just stones thrown together, it's minerals that will blow your mind. Let's jump in. Interesting prehistoric ruins. A Texas correspondent writes to one of the scientific departments of the government of a strangely interesting prehistoric wall discovered on the frontier of the Lone Star State. This marvelous ruin surpasses in interest all the other wonderful remains hitherto found of the people who once inhabited the whole Mexican plateau and attained a high state of civilization. It passes through Milano and has a total length of about 20 miles. It's much longer than that, actually, you guys. It's much longer than that. It is built of solid masonry, 10 to 15 feet high, and as many feet thick. Its height and thickness are thus almost as great as the famous Chinese wall of the north of China. The direction is northeast and southwest. I love this article so much. I made an image for every clipping. So here's the first one, and here's the second one, and you'll see why as we read along. It is for the most part underground, and is one of the curious things that puzzle those wise men who are supposed to know all about prehistoric remains. It is undoubtedly very old. One might suppose it to be the sure foundation of a gigantic fortress which rose above the ground many feet. Yeah, you guys, this whole wall again was buried 60 feet or more, and I guarantee you it's even bigger, and the whole city is buried beneath it. As we stated, we started the article with what? The city of El Paso is built on an ancient marble castle. The towers and other means of defense which it might have been provided have had time to crumble away in the years that have passed. Again, so we're dealing with tidal waves, we're dealing with mud floods, we're dealing with volcanoes burying marble cities. I mean, this whole area was just wrought with destruction, several different events. You know, the Aztecs and the Mayans talk about four separate ages. That reminds us again of the four layers of cypress forest in Mississippi, with the skeleton found below the fourth layer. So four events. And we found evidence of that in Arizona. We found evidence of that in California. Um, and before one or two events, the entire world was tropical. The entire world had the same ecosystem, the same weather. This strengthens the whole weather canopy, cloud barrier concept. And this even strengthens more, as I've hypothesized in the past, that we had giant trees, thousands, maybe even miles tall. And when you look at the ecosystem of a of a tropical jungle or a rainforest, the trees create a barrier, okay, a cloud canopy. This exists today, where the weather above it and the weather below it are completely different, where sunlight doesn't even penetrate, just UV light. And in these ecosystems, 90% of all life are inside the tree, on the tree, or around the tree. This is what I think we were like in the past, that we were these cave systems and these cliff dwellers and all of these things were ancient trees. We were living in the tree. We were carving our way like ants, like termites, into these trees, these subterranean dwellings, these deep underground military bases, ideas I've been throwing around, this mining camps that follow these veins like ants through an ant hill. This is trees. And like Avatar, this is the life we were living in. And that some event happened. The sand of the world, the deserts of the world were created in an instant by the vaporization, petrifaction of organic matter. And yeah, that's obviously, that's kind of out there. But share more of my opinions about the overall view of things. But yeah, so where was I? The curious thing, the puzzle is supposed to know prehistoric. It is for the most part underground, like we said. And this is one of the curious things that puzzle those wise men who are supposed to know all about prehistoric remains. Again, these wise men, all if anything, if they've traveled to these sites we've been covering on this series, they're going to find, oh, shit, we've dug 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stories down, and the cities get more advanced and larger and more complex. That's weird. One might suppose it to be sure a foundation of a gigantic fortress, as we said. Yeah, the towers, right? I already covered all this. My apologies. The long fortress may have been pulled down by the conquering invaders. No, I don't believe that for a second. I definitely think it was an event, some kind of event of deluge or a volcanic event, or who knows. As the people died out from the land, the debris of the old wall would, in either case, cover its foundation. Okay, so when we get more into this, we'll get into Mississippi. We'll talk about the Mississippi Great Wall, where they disassembled this great stone wall and they built their courthouse out of it. So they were just disassembling these buildings. As I stated, in Colorado, the Smithsonian was dismantling ancient buildings, and the governor was pleading with the federal government to do something about it because there were no laws against it. Many of the courthouse buildings and these ancient stone buildings that we see are built of ancient masonry from a lost race. The Aztecs probably built this wall. They have some inscriptions on it. But since their language is entirely lost, no scholar can ever hope to decipher them. One covers a space of 8 feet square. The characters are kindred to Indian inscriptions. Remember what I was saying earlier? Now, on pyramids in Mexico, they found this block Hebrew, quote, Chinese hieroglyphics. It's the same old language, okay? It's the same thing. Proto-Phoenician, same thing. Block Hebrew, same thing. Same characters, just changed. You get different cultures changing things slowly over time, but not so closely allied that their mystery can be penetrated. There was undoubtedly a populous village or city in the vicinity, for on a hill near Milano, the remains of a mighty temple of worship are found. This was supported by more than 200 lofty pillars. Some of them are still standing. They were made of clay, which was well burned. This takes us back to the terracotta of Arizona, the terracotta of Utah, where they were making clay into advanced stone. And all of the thousands of miles of canals that are still used today were terracotta and cobblestone canals. Insanely advanced, tons of labor. The oldest terracotta is not in China, it's here in the Americas, in Arizona, in Utah, in Mexico. Now, just think of this, right? This is in Milano. For those of you that live in Texas, this is gone. Think about this. A stone temple with 200 pillars, like a Greek temple. They gave them the appearance of stone, of course. In this temple were placed many idols, broken parts of which are preserved. One shaped like an owl is preserved entire. Remember the shield with the owl symbol. Now, the owl symbol, Minerva and so forth, you can trace these symbols all over the world. Here's the inside of this temple. This is for the next part here. Human sacrifices were made to these, as well as sacrifices of birds, beasts, and reptiles. Skulls and bones have been preserved in the clay. Some of these belong to very large animals. Some are petrified, and it is though that these early Aztecs may have understood the art of assisting petrifaction and thus preserved the bones of their sacrifices. That's ridiculous. This is just, they have no way to conceptualize the idea of some cataclysmic event where everything was petrified. And remember, humidity, state of the air, state of the water content, what the thing's made of, everything petrifies differently into different minerals. And there are so many different factors that contribute to how the thing petrifies. So when they find these, they're like, these guys must have knew how to do this. No, this event that destroyed this city and buried it was completely either out of their concept of possibility or they're covering for it. I just think the idea of a plasma event, they couldn't even wrap their mind around. The idols, I apologize, are all curiously marked. Around each pillar, small stones are piled up in circles or squares, and inside the circle, underneath the pillar, there is a center of foundation stone fashioned to represent the Godhead. Now, if you don't know what the Godhead is, it's like the Irish Trinity, right? The three overlapping circles with the pyramid. Okay, a symbol again that's found universally. Here we have it in Texas, and it's found in Japan. It's found in all over Asia. It's found in Mexico. It's found in South America. It's found all over Europe predominantly. Near the wall, there are also furnaces in which the natives melted iron. Remember, iron work. Okay, these Stone Age people have furnaces and they're melting iron. Again, these Iron Ages and Stone Ages, they just don't add up. That they don't add up. The locality and direction of the walls are easily accounted for. Perhaps it marks the boundary of certain tribal territory, which was exposed to the attacks of the enemy. An enormous amount of labor and material must have been required for its construction, if built above the ground on the same gigantic plan as the foundation. Yeah, of course, because we're dealing with millions of people. Although there were toward a million people, that's funny, a million people living in the vicinity, the work must have extended over a considerable period of time. Yeah, hundreds of millions of people, you guys. Unless this was some strategic point, it is difficult to understand how but a few thousand could be interested in its construction. And here's the last part of it. An old tradition says that the Aztecs were one. This is a really powerful piece here. So stick with me here on this one, okay? I'll read it slow. An old tradition says that the Aztecs were one of the 7 powerful tribes that emerged from the 7 caverns in a region called Aztlan, or place of the heron. Now, we talked about this in Utah, and so many different, quote, Aboriginal Native American tribes had this story handed to them. The 7 sleepers, Snow White and the 7 dwarves. This is the concept that these different root races or phenotypes, kind of like the Babylon story, that some event occurred and they exited inner earth to the upper terrestrial realm that we live in today, and that's where all these different groups of people, these different languages, these different phenotypes, they all came from inner earth. They wandered away from their fellows after a great confusion of the tongues, exactly, and settled in the region they are known to have inhabited. This tradition may be partly fabulous, but it is sure that the Aztecs settled the country before the 11th or 12th century. Now, again, it may be a stretch, but thinking about the vapor canopy and these large trees, the realm of the world, and I've talked about this again, going back to my old world Florida talks with Dr. Longo. When a hurricane hits Florida, animals of all creed, even animals that kill each other, they will go inside of the cypress tree. So you'll have all these different animals in a storm. Everything is off limits. Everyone's just looking to survive. So you'll have animals that hunt each other. They all go into the tree. The cypress tree has about a third of its height is hollow, and they'd go inside the tree to survive the storm. And I think that this may be a similar idea here, that these races or people would go subterranean or in the tree, and that some major event happened. And after living underground or inside the tree or both, when everything subsided on the earth, a flood, who knows, volcanic eruptions, they emerged back to the surface. All the tribes lived in peace for a considerable time. Exactly. I've been saying this all along. I think that they were building these incredibly complex structures to survive animals, mega fauna, mega reptiles, titans, huge. And it'd be so difficult in these time periods, in my opinion, to get such a large use of labor and a whole culture united against one thing if they were warring with all these other people. I don't think that's what was happening. I think they were united in survival and building up structures to protect themselves against giant beasts. So all the tribes lived in peace until the strong began to encroach upon the territory of the weak. And then eventually, the killing off of some of these giant reptiles, that men began to war with each other. Then in a fierce war for supremacy over the whole territory ensued and lasted many years. I've talked a lot about Edgar Cayce. Edgar Cayce's book on Atlantis is one of my favorites. I strongly recommend it. I think you can get it for like under $10. It's a short read. I would read that. His opinion is what I most strongly lean towards. And he says the Atlanteans were warring against giant animals, giant sea creatures, giant snakes, giant lizards, and that they had advanced technology, and that was what was keeping them safe. Um, Lasted many years. War ensued over territory. Under the leadership of their military chiefs, the Aztecs obtained control of the territory and established a very enlightened form of government. This was consummated in the year 1324 or 1325. It is likely that the fortress was built during this period of war. Normally, that date would seem a little weird. But what's amazing is if you remember in my previous article, my New Mexico article, they talked about that ancient bell. They found an ancient bell that was given to them by an Aboriginal tribe in the area, and the date on the bell was 1300. Okay, and they had a priest, a Catholic priest, look at it, and he said, "Oh, this is very troubling for us because the oldest Catholic settlements was in the 1500s." And the Catholics supposedly were the only ones building bells in America at that time. So who built this bell in 1300 with a cross on it, with a cross on the bell? Well, man, the cross is a symbol that's universal across the world. It's not just a Christian symbol at all. In fact, it's found all over Mexico and the Gulf of Mexico and in America, the ancient version of the cross, right? And the fact that this author puts this date at 1324 with the formation of the Aztec government is incredibly important. Kind of ties it all together. Kind of gives us a little bit of a timeline. Again, timelines are hard for me. I don't stick to timelines; they can be very tricky. But yeah, it just kind of brings some of the other articles into view. Thank you, Jillian, for posting that. Yeah, yeah. Edgar Cayce on Atlantis. Again, one of my favorite books. It's a quick read. You can read it in like a day or two. Yeah, it's fantastic. Where to go from there? Holy smokes. Where are we at? We're at 6:45. Just want to say again, I love you guys. Thank you for being here. Um, your time is the most important thing. Remember that. Um, the most valuable thing you have is your time. It's not money, it's not anything else, it's your time. And remember that. And I hold that very, very in high regard, and that I appreciate your eyes and your attention, and it means a lot to me. It's incredibly important, and I don't want to take advantage of that. So again, I just want to say I appreciate you guys being here. Where do we go next? So the rock wall of Texas. Um, I didn't get into the mineral content because it wasn't until I believe the 1980s they started to take some of the rocks out of this wall, and through mineral analysis, they were finding titanium and all these exotic metals in the rock wall. And if one of my mods could put a link to Karimo's channel to his Rockwall, Texas video in the chat for me, that would be great. His video is fantastic. It has some of the late and modern interviews they did regarding the mineral composition and analysis of this rock wall. And it was mind blowing, you guys. We're talking about metals that will blow your mind, that supposedly, we didn't even, um, from a metallurgy standpoint, and when you look at the table of elements, these are elements that we didn't even know existed, and they're in this wall, strengthening what I have been saying. And when you look at Edgar Cayce's material, I would go as far as to say that this rock wall of Texas is an Atlantean wall. It was built to keep out giant animals, and that it was electrified, or it created some kind of spherical shield. This is why I was referencing. Man, I'm spacing the name of the movie. Black Panther. If you guys haven't seen the most recent Black Panther movie, after going through this Texas video, I think you could go back and watch that and see some of the overlays with these old articles and the tech that they're using in that movie. And the advanced ships, the concealment and the electrical protection sphere bubbles that they were using. I think this rock wall was energized in some way, like an old style electric fence, kind of. As crazy as that sounds. But yeah, we're dealing with organic tech that's far more advanced than we could have ever imagined. And the Gulf is a big key to all this, and these buried ruins that we're finding all throughout. Now we're in episode 10, and we started in Alaska, and we found incredible things there all the way through Texas, and just kind of reinforcing that all. What to cover next? We're running out of time, so I want to pick these appropriately. Oh, this one's fun. Why not just do that? This one's short, so why not do this one? Here's the AI image. Gatesville, Texas is excited over the appearance of an immense orangutan in its vicinity. The animal is described as being about 7 feet high and covered from head to foot, with a thick coating of hair. Its eyes shine like fire, and it boasts a double row of teeth. When last seen, it had in a hand a large crooked stick, and under the other arm a young calf, apparently just killed. A hunting party has been organized to capture or kill the monster. So I just highlight a section, put it in AI, and this is the image it gets me. Obviously, AI is not always going to be very accurate, but this one I enjoy. Just imagine. Is this the first Bigfoot sighting here? Right? 1871? Don't know, but it just stood out to me. I loved it. Read a few of the shorter ones here. Gold in Texas. The Houston Telegraph says that the preparations are in progress in all parts of the state for a grand expedition to the gold region that has been discovered in northern Texas, not far from the ruins of the celebrated city of Gran Quivera. Now, remember, if you go back, I have quite a few articles on Gran Quivera and the immensity of it. Remember, Gran Quivera was a city that was miles and miles long, huge cities that went on for 30 plus miles, that were buried hundreds of feet into the earth, hundreds and hundreds of rooms, immense. One of the largest buildings found in America, in the world even, was there. Immense excavations are shown along the foot of the mountains, and the ruins of vast cities indicate that these mines were once worked by millions of people. The geographic formations of this region are similar to those of the gold regions of California. Yeah, absolutely. Worked by millions, vast cities, like we've been saying. Titans of a previous age, I labeled this. I don't really like this AI image very much. It really struggles when you put in, bones and petrified and stuff like that. But in Stonewall County, Texas, Stonewall County, again, they found a giant stone wall in Stonewall County, Texas. Go figure. The rock wall of Rockwall, Texas, I think these walls are all over the state. I think Texas was covered. Texas was tropical at one point. There were no deserts. It was covered in tropical foliage everywhere, all across the state. And there were endless cities with walls 20, 40, 60 feet high, all over. The petrified skeleton of a monster whale was discovered a few days ago. It is described as being perfect in shape, but has been converted into the hardest kind of rock. The skeleton can be easily traced for about 100 feet, but it is believed to be much longer than that. Some contend that it is not a whale, but a giant lizard. I would go with the lizard. And the reason, excuse me, and the reason I'd go with the lizard is a lot of these old skeletons, these giant titanic lizards, were aquatic. And again, we've already talked about how much of Texas had the rivers were either much larger or that the Gulf of Mexico went much farther into the state. And I would say this was a giant aquatic lizard. that existed in former ages, supposed to be as big as a meeting house and as long as a railroad train. The curiosity will probably be exhumed and exhibited. No, it won't. It was gone, never to be heard from again, like a lot of these titanic lizards and reptiles. Remember, we have giant petrified animals, hundreds of feet all the way into Alaska. The largest petrifaction article I've ever found was in the Gobi Desert, and it was 900 feet long. And they said that it was so large that it was as large as the Woolworth building. And that article always stuck out to me because it reminded me of Godzilla. Like they're relating the size of this creature to its size of a skyscraper, and it just, anyways. Someday I'll share that article on an episode here. But since we're talking about petrifactions a little more and why that's so important, because it really is a glimpse into the previous ages, and that these petrified giant animals and megafauna were existing side by side with cities like the Rockwall city. And the reason that they don't dig out more of this rock wall is because there's a giant city, as this article stated. Remember, that was 1870. Giant city under, and this is the entire America as a whole is built on a giant previous race. That's why excavations never go this far, and that's why these old newspapers are great, because a lot of the first mining that was being done, whether it was driving coal shafts, they're hitting at 100 feet, they're finding skeletons. At 300 feet, they're finding abandoned cities. Can't wait for the Missouri episode. It's going to blow your guys' mind. So we'll jump in here. Important geological find in Texas, 1910. San Antonio, Texas, March 26. While blasting for the foundation piers of a new bridge across the Medina River, traces in large quantity of a forest belonging to some prehistoric period, possibly the Cretaceous. Again, these periods, the Cretaceous and all Tetrary, in the millions and hundreds of thousands of years, I don't agree with that at all. I think these ages are far closer to our timeline than we're told. They're not millions of years, not even close. If the rock wall buried city and the petrified tropical climate can be so close to one another, in fact, just a layer separated, there's no way it's hundreds of thousands of years, not even close. Traces in large quantity of a forest belonging to some prehistoric period, possibly the Cretaceous, were discovered a few days ago. Large pieces of somewhat laminated limestone. Now, that's really important. That's the trees again. Laminated limestone. They're dealing with huge layers of petrified trees, belonging to either the lower or upper Cretaceous, show profuse tracings of a flora now extinct in these parts, as one of the slabs unearthed bearing an almost photographic reproduction of a leaf, a little less than 10 inches in width and 18 inches in length. Huge leaf, petrified into laminated limestone, right? And this hundreds of thousands of years. No, it's not even close to that. Other rocks show similar leaves besides a large number of others, as well as the petals of flowers. Okay. A petal of flower couldn't fall down in mud and sit there for 1,000,000 years and slowly petrify. Again, we're dealing with some serious events here. Impressions of bark and the grain of the wood have also been discerned. Just incredible. This is everywhere. This is all across the American Southwest. Insect and animal life has so far not been recognized. Professor Frederick William Simmons, head of the Geological Department of the University of Texas, has been notified of the discovery, and with several members of his class will make an examination of the spot. It was at first supposed that the find might belong to the Tertiary, which is well represented in southwest Texas, and to which belong the vast deposits of lignite found in many parts of the state. But this theory has been discarded for the reason that the Tertiary is imposed upon the upper Cretaceous and is characterized by superfluignous sands, sandy clays, and marls. Again, we keep talking about organic life that's been petrified. So when they talk about all these different layers, it's different levels of petrifaction. And I'd go as far as to say it's different levels in one petrifaction, one giant tree or one giant layer of something massive. Again, we keep going back to tropical. Alaska was completely tropical, covered in giant trees, megafauna. Um, there were areas in Alaska where people, miners, prospectors, were walking through snowy valleys and found gardens of Eden in the middle of these snowy valleys, where some kind of underground, radium vent, volcanic vent had kept the ground free of snow and had allowed a tropical forest to grow that was full of animals and tropical plants in the middle of snowy Alaska. So some of these places survived and grew. If you haven't seen that, I would recommend going back to the Alaska episode just for those tropical articles because they strengthen this universal climate. Where was I? Examination. It was first supposed. No, I already said that. Cover that. Upper Cretaceous. Sands, clays, marls, the materials found on top of the stratum in which the remains were found. This being the case, there is every reason to hope that the discovery will prove of great value. The site of the find is located some 500 feet above sea level, and to judge by the nature of the rocks, was at one time aquatic, if not marine. A conclusion which is amply corroborated by the vegetation found. Yeah, like we've been saying, they keep finding all kinds of aquatic life deep, deep into Texas at high elevations. Either we're dealing with a deluge, or we're dealing with the Gulf of Mexico extended far, far into Texas. And sea levels were higher as well. A petrified woman is puzzle to Texas man, 1931. Love this picture, again, as you know. Clipping the article into AI. Petrified woman is puzzled a Texas man. A petrified woman was found in a petrified forest near Rio Grande City the other day by E.A. Brown, retired automobile dealer of Edinburgh. The contours of the body are so perfect that since it has been removed here and cleaned by Mr. Brown, has been wondering whether a woman was really petrified or whether it is a piece of ancient statuary, perhaps discarded from one of the early Spanish shrines in the lower Rio Grande Valley. Roots up to 3 inches in diameter were interlaced above and around the reclining form, which was found buried 6 feet of earth. Okay, this was buried 6 feet below the earth. A petrified woman in such perfect form, he wasn't sure if it was a statue or not. Now, it could have been a statue, but again, an ancient statue that was so perfectly carved it resembled a woman in every way and was found buried 6 feet below the earth. Nonetheless, in a petrified forest. Okay? So I would say this was absolutely a living, breathing woman who was petrified in this event that hit the same forest. Giant oyster found in fossil beds, Texas, 1925. Brownsville, Texas. Giant fossil oyster shells said by scientists to be more than 400,000 years old. Remember, this is just below the surface, you guys. These aren't 400,000 years old. There's no way. Okay? Now, we just talked about El Paso's built on a giant marble city. Okay? Rockwall, Texas, built on a giant ancient city with advanced stone walls. Okay? And these oyster beds are just found in the clay, buried just 6, 7, 8 feet below the earth. And they're 400,000 years old? I don't think so. And they measure more than 3 feet in length. Think about that. A giant oyster, 3 feet long, you guys. And they found oysters that are 10 feet long. Has been discovered in a clay bank in Starr County, Texas, near a petrified forest. Of course. I mean, it's like the markers are everywhere, you guys. This wasn't washed up here, and this isn't 400,000 years old. This petrifaction event, there's been several of them. I'd go as far as to say, because you find petrifactions 100 feet below the earth, even farther than that. The fossils were found in a clay and shell bank about 1,000 feet above sea level. Again, So sea level was either much higher, or some kind of volcanic event raised the earth, which again, the story of the Rocky Mountains being created overnight. We know that large elevations can happen in just a few hours, if not a few days or a few weeks or a few months. A volcanic event can push up um, whole mountains. So several options there, but it's definitely not 400,000 years old. Some of the specimens have been sent to the Smithsonian. Gone. Scientists declare that huge reptiles swam in the waters which covered the lower Rio Grande Valley in the Paleozoic age. I apologize for these ages. I can never get these names right. And that the large oysters lodged in the gravel banks along the seashore in what is now Starr and Zapata counties. Strengthening again that the giant reptiles swam. We've found giant reptiles in every state in this series, every single one. Near the fossil bank are hundreds of petrified trees, some of them 4 feet in diameter. In this forest is a variety of oak now extinct in this part of the country, an ancient forest that doesn't even grow there anymore. Of course, just like the giant leaves and the flower petals that we just talked about. All right, we're running out of time. Which one? Let's be a little picky here and make sure I get some of my favorite. That was a good one. That's a long one though. We got to read that one. Okay, we'll do one more petrifaction and then we're going to go back to the freak giant with a tail. Forest turned to stone. Oh man, that's a good one too. Okay, so strengthening that you guys again should go back and read my thread here, because you'll get some articles that I don't have time to cover, and you'll get to see some other ones. And again, use the search function. Click the search, the magnifying glass, type in my name, 1_analog_9 with a space, and then anything you want. You type in the state name, Nevada, Alaska. You'll get my thread on the episode that I covered. You can search anything you want. Giants, petrified, monster, and there's going to be dozens of articles. In a remote valley, Marathon, Texas, a forest turned to stone. The most marvelous petrified forest known to man has been found by 2 geologists in a remote valley of the Big Bend region, nearly 100 miles from the nearest railroad at Marathon, Texas. Petrified tree trunks of 100 to 150 feet were found standing. You guys, 100 to 100 foot trunk standing, petrified. Think of how big this tree was. How much of this tree got knocked off? And others of a size and diameter and length unparalleled in the world. One of these was 896 feet long. This is a tree that had fallen over and was 896 feet long. Petrified tree lying on the ground, 896 feet long. And that's not even the whole tree. The valley in which this stone forest was found is split up by a deep canyon. Its surface is covered by a thick layer of volcanic ashes, which evidently came from a long extinct peak in the neighboring Chisos Mountains. But long after the forest had passed into its petrified state, we haven't yet learned all there is to know about the land in which we live. Of course. I love that. That could just be the end of every article. We haven't yet learned all there is to know about the land in which we live. 100%. 900-foot tall petrified tree in Texas, you guys. Monster. Speaking of monsters, we're going to end the show with the discovery of the missing link in the mountains of Texas. Here's the image. This will just give you an idea of what we're about to read about, okay? A tailed prehistoric man. Discovery of the missing link in the mountains of Texas. 150 miles east of El Paso, via the Texas and Pacific Railway, and in 25 miles of the road is the new mining camp named Chorizo, where the richest silver and copper mines in Texas have recently been discovered. Immediately north of Chorizo, if I'm pronouncing that wrong, I apologize. I pronounce a lot of things wrong, lies that famous mountain range called the Diablo. or the Devil's Mountain, towering over 1,000 feet above the surrounding plain. Near the summit, which is composed of limestone, okay, a mountain made of limestone, or again, organic matter, petrifactions of trees, as we stated already, they found limestone in petrified trees. Huge layers of it. Are found numerous caves and tunnels. Now, when I made that relation earlier to when we lived in an age of giant trees, we were carving into the trees, just like we carve into limestone because it's easy to carve into limestone caves, which extend for a distance of 10 miles. Again, near the summit, which is composed of limestone, are found numerous caves and tunnels which extend for a distance of 10 miles. Some of them penetrate the mountain fully 500 feet. 10 miles of tunnels, 500 feet deep. Indian tradition accounts for these caves as the abodes of spirits or devils, and the extremely superstitious Apaches give the haunted Diablo Mountains a wide berth. Until very recently, the dark, terrible, and frowning mount has never been explored by white men. The nomadic cowboy, not caring to scale its rugged heights nor face the superstitious awe which seemed to surround the place, and take possession of the intruder. Since the discovery of silver there, however, the more venturous miners have partially explored one long cave. N.A. Osmer, an old frontiersman with a scientific beat of mind, was the first white man to enter the so-called habitation of the spirits. With a tallow candle and prospector pick, he penetrated the cave 100 feet, but did not venture further. The walls of the cavern bore numerous evidences of former habitation. Stone implements, bone needles, and pottery in excellent preservation were scattered here and there in the caves. Carcasses of bears and other huge animals were lying near a heap of ashes. The mold of ages lay deep on the floor and sides of the cavern. Surely he thought this was the home of the ancient cliff dweller. Osmer then went with his prospect pick, began digging in a pile of dirt, and was rewarded by unearthing a skeleton of gigantic proportions. First the skull, then the vertebrae were brought to light. But in the meantime his candle had burned low, and rather unnerved by the strange spectacle and the hideous moaning sound of the wind as it waved through the awful depths of the gloomy old cave, which is now the abode of the mountain lion and other ferocious beasts, Osmer retreated to daylight, carrying with him the skull and the backbone. The skull he found to be that of a man. The under jaw is of mammoth size, easily receiving the head of an ordinary man within its sides. The teeth are enormous, molars or double teeth all around. Again, double rows of teeth. We keep finding these giants, not all of them, but not one, but several of them have double rows of teeth. You remember the possible Bigfoot sighting, the person clearly says double row of teeth. The surprise and gratification were great in Osmer when he examined the vertebrae. It is of immense size, and the strange thing about it is that instead of terminating abruptly as the ordinary man, it is prolonged for 8 or 10 inches beyond, describing a graceful curve to the rear. While the main vertebrae is firmly set, the eodal, I apologize, I think that must be a misspelling, appendage is flexible, and its juncture with the backbone proper, and the usual location of the coccyx, it measures 4 1 inches wide, but it narrows rapidly toward the end. Considerable of the tail has disappeared, probably by decomposition, but sufficient remains to demonstrate beyond a doubt that at last the long-sought man with a tail has been found in the mysterious old cavern of northwest Texas. Mr. Osmond refuses all offers for his strange find and keeps it closely guarded in his cabin, allowing the curious visitor to see his old cliff dweller friend at all times. It should be seen by scientific men and examined, and perhaps the Darwinian theory will be forever established beyond even the shadow of a doubt. And it would, in all probability, be time well spent for the men of the science to visit Carrizo and further explore the prehistoric caverns of Diabolos. So, yeah, giant man with a jaw so large it could fit over a normal human skull, double rows of giant teeth, huge vertebrae, and a long extended tail. This isn't the only skeleton I found with a tail. I have many, many, many more. And they're always giants, and they often always have double rows of teeth. In fact, I even have a petrified giant skeleton with wings. Petrified giant skeleton, double rows of teeth with wings and a tail. I think that one's in Tennessee. So stay tuned. Obviously, as we get farther into this, I'll try to make sure I get more of these interesting skeletons involved in this. And like I mentioned earlier in the episode, the more time I've invested into what ancient America looked like, the more Lord of the Rings starts to ring true here. I have dwarfs, I have gnomes, I have giants with wings, giants with tails, giants with horns. I have cyclopses. They found two giants in Massachusetts that just had one eye socket, one giant eye socket in the center of the skull. Yeah, we come from a very mysterious previous age or ages, and let your mind wander, and don't be afraid to be too outlandish, because truth is stranger than fiction, and science fiction is based on truth. I think it's definitely not science fiction. So yeah, we're gonna end it there. Love you all very much. Thank you again for joining me for episode 10. Can't believe we're 10 episodes in. Episode 11 is going to be a vote episode. So stay tuned on YouTube and on Twitter for the vote. I haven't decided if it's going to be Oklahoma or Louisiana. I'm not sure yet, but it's probably going to be those two. And again, 220 people. It's the best turnout I've ever had. It's fantastic. I hope these episodes are still something you all enjoy. And every one of you that donated today, from the bottom of my heart, it means very much to me. And someday down the road, we're hoping to, make this, maybe not full time, but at least part time, and then I can invest more material into this. And it's growing faster than I ever imagined, and that's all due to you guys. And yeah, so again, make sure to leave a comment if you have a question or anything you want to say. And there were probably 3 or 4 really good articles that I didn't get in here that if time permitting, I'll record some short videos later on in the week and add those into the channel. So stay tuned for those. My goal is to announce the membership side of the channel by the end of the week as well. So stay tuned for that. If that's something you're interested, that's awesome. If not, no big deal. No pressure. I'm just trying to create as many avenues for people, for whatever their interest is. If they want a little bit more, then that's great. If you don't, that's fine. I appreciate you no matter what you come here for or what you're interested in, or if you have money to spend or not. It's just your interest and your eyes and your time that I'm the most appreciative of. And I don't want you to forget that. So that's number one. Somewhere in time, thank you. I appreciate it very much. Longo, I love you, man. So yeah, stay tuned. I'm going to try and do my full radium episode. I have a lot of people messaging me about that. Again, it's just hard. That's probably going to be a 2-hour video for the material that I have. We're going to go into the background of radium. We're going to talk about the discovery of radium, the quote discovery of radium, the new world discovery of radium. Everyone's been aware of it. Marie Curie, or Mercury, her name is Mercury, where she was getting her radium from, the people propping her up, the radium industry, the German control of all the radium mines, what that meant for the world wars, what that meant for advanced technology. So yeah, stay tuned for that as well. When that'll get up, I don't know. Hopefully by the end of the week, but that's a lot of work I just labeled off there. So let's be realistic. But yeah, so ultimately, love you guys. Thank you for being here. Again, questions, comments, anything, leave them for me. My email, since people don't see it when you go to my channel, it's right up there with the Instagram and Twitter links. My email is right there. So send me an email if it's something you want to talk about outside of comments. And yeah, so stay tuned for the updates. Thank you all for 6K. Means a lot. And love you guys. Have a wonderful, wonderful Tuesday. And look forward to spending more time with you later this week. Have a wonderful day, guys. Bye.